Quite yet, so we can guarantee having 4 speakers, and we certainly hope to have 5. So the speakers are, in order, Wiebke Finkler from the University of Otago in New Zealand, Ratna Permatasari from Dr. Rabbit Inc. in Indonesia, Bonnie Determan from the Museum for Naturkunde in Berlin, Rita Ceccarelli from the CNR in Italy, and the missing one is Kinkini Dasgupta Misra from Vigyan Prasar in India. So our first speaker today is Wiebke. Now, I've told all speakers that they have 8 minutes to present their ideas. I will signify when 7 minutes has passed. And then we'll have a brief question time if anyone want to clarify facts, and that should leave us time at the end to have a more concentrated discussion where all speakers can be involved. And just one note, this event is being recorded. So let me introduce Wiebke Finkler, and her topic is Virtual Nature for Science Marketing, a New Zealand pilot study on immersive 360-degree VR experiences for nature, connectedness, and well-being. Welcome, Wiebke.
Well, kia ora, thank you for that, Toss. So yeah, fantastic. Thanks for being here today. I'll be talking to you about virtual nature for science marketing. Bit of background, I've got 20 years experience in traditional kind of documentary style filmmaking, and am now the lead of the Visual Research Lab at Otago here, where we're using science communication, but using marketing tools to develop and test communication campaigns, can be video campaigns or message framing, storytelling, so working in that space. So I'll be presenting our New Zealand pilot study on immersive 360 VR, so an area that we're moving into a bit more increasingly so. Of course, hang on, I'm just trying. Okay, none of that could happen without a really great team, and I've got a fantastic team that I've been working with. So very, very cross-disciplinary, including people from the Department of Zoology, the Department of Medicine, Physical Education, Information Technology, and then we ran everything in the lab in the Department of Marketing. To set the stage, virtual reality, there's 2 types of virtual reality that we typically talk about. One is a kind of computer-generated assets where you create a world in the computer using digital real estate that you create. And the other one is where you go and film with a kind of GoPro-like 360 camera, and that is what I'm talking about. So you go into space, you film with a 360 camera, you capture that whole environment in 360, and that is the study that we are talking about here. So VR is such a communication strategy, very immersive and interactive. Of course, it creates a realistic and immersive environment, and you put on a VR headset, or you can use applications. You can use your phone or desktop to scroll around and really take in that immersive space. VR has that potential to transport your audiences into that 3D environment. You look around and there's potential to connect with the audience and build engagement. For science marketing, there are some really exciting avenues that you can use 360 VR for. There have been health campaigns created where people can experience the changes that they can expect from exercising, from weight loss, or from cancer treatment. Research indicates, media research in that space, that 360 video motivates to watch people, for people to watch more, to interact more, to share, subscribe, and consume more content. And of course, COVID-19 has really highlighted the need to connect people with nature, especially those that are less mobile, but of course, not only those. And I think COVID-19 really brought that home. Initially, our research was intended, was started before COVID. We're going to go into rest home and care facilities to test this intervention. COVID hit, and we realized actually the application is much wider than that. So VR nature or virtual nature has been investigated and shown to promote pro-environmental behaviors and commitment to the environment. So this is the kind of research space that we are working in. The research questions and also some of the theoretical foundation, just so to mention them. So first of all, we wanted to know, what is participants' experience like this? You know, there's a whole range of what a VR experience can look like in terms of how you produce, the rigor that goes into production. We also are really interested in the sense of presence, of being there. So we use the iGroup presence questionnaire for that, very established presence research tool. Number two, we were interested to find out what's the impact on participants' emotional state. So here we're looking at negative and positive affect, well-being and mood, and we use the two-dimensional circumflex model of affect. Three, we were interested to find out what is the influence on this virtual nature on audience's connection to nature. And here we're using Maya and Fran's survey to evaluate oneness with nature. The methodology in terms of how we went about it. So this is the parts of the lab that we were working on. So we produced the 360 VR videos. They were pre-tested. They were then refined based on applied media aesthetic, soundscape design, and visual research methods that my colleagues and I have been really trying to push, of how to use visual research as a rigorous tool for science communication. Participants then watched 4 2-minute 360 VR videos on a headset. They used an Oculus headset, and it was a swivel chair experiment. So basically it means that participants were sitting in an office chair, swivel chair, that they could move around. We didn't want people to stand up. That's not safe in that space. So sitting down, but they can swivel around to look around the 360 space. Playback was controlled remotely. There were onboarding and offboarding clips to make it easier and ease people into the experience. And then we had filmed shots on a tripod mounted, locked off shots. That means there was no movement in the camera. And we used forest, beach, mountain lake, and a duck pond scene, and used also ambisonic sound, which is spatial sound that we added. And I'll show you the little clip here, just a little bit to get a bit of an idea. So you're in that space, in the headset, you're looking around, you're on the beach. You look below, shortly you see the tripod legs. That's the only thing that's visible. Everything else, the tripod has been made invisible by the software. So, of course, I can use them for the first thing to show you around. In the headset, everything is touched through there, and you look around at that scene, and whatever's happening there, people moving around, or wildlife, or just waves coming and going. So that was one of the scenes that participants then watched 2 minutes from, just to give you a bit of an idea. Right, we then looked at, what are people's preferences here, because we wanted to connect that with the visual research methods. So they had to rank the order of preferences for the clips. The most favorite one was the beach, followed by the Mount Cook, the forest, and the duck pond. In terms of, we were interested to find out what are the most and least liked elements. So 2 open-ended questions. Participants most enjoyed the sound and the view of the 360. So the kind of how real it felt, how I could look up and down, that the image continued. I was standing on the beach myself in real life. The sounds were real. I felt as if I was transported there. On the other hand, the least liked elements were things that broke reality and the video quality. What does that mean in the context of 360 VR? Things that break reality is that kind of, not having a realistic sense of body, the intrusion of the real world, uncomfortable headset getting in the way, not being able to move. So the difference to gaming, where you've got an avatar where you can then move around in that space, here you can only look around. And then other things, the video quality, which is still, we filmed in 6K, but once you wrap that around you in 360, you still get that pixelated look. So summary of findings, participants considered the experience supportive, easy, efficient, clear, exciting, interesting, inventive, and leading edge. So that's research question 1, the user experience. They felt like they were there, so they really got that spatial presence, the involvement, and relatively high realism simulation. After watching the 360 videos, participants became happier and calmer. So that's research objective 2, looking at well-being and mood. And 3, the connectedness to nature. The nature videos significantly increased the participants' connectedness to nature state. There's a trait element and a state element. We looked at state element to nature connectedness as part of a media impact study. So what does all of that mean? It suggests that 360 VR nature videos can be cost-effective means to provide important benefits, psychological and physical benefits to society, and that they are a potentially powerful role, that they can play this role for immersive, for e-health initiatives, for engaging audiences with that. Of course, there are limitations. This was the first pilot proof of concept with 63 participants involved for this. It was a lab testing environment. Ideally, you want to be in people's home. Ambisonic sound, attaching that and connecting that to head movements. So spatial sound is still a bit of a challenge. So we really got to work in a gaming engine for that. And then the technological barriers like the 360 resolution, which is still something, but we found good soundscapes actually compensate for a lack of quality in the visuals. So developing good soundscape can be very effective here. And that was me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wiebke. What do you see as the potential use for this particular thing? I mean, you've talked about health benefits, you've talked about communicating science. Could you describe a little more about the applications of this technique? And my second question,
there's a whole world. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a whole world of opportunities here working with VR, especially once you integrate the video into gaming engines where you get that interactivity. So we have produced field trips where you then use augmented reality to get that multimedia kind of effect. So for communicating specific things, it just always depends for what space you're working in, of course, and what the topic is. What do you want people to do? I think modeling of behavior can be really interesting here. So for behavior change initiatives. So I think the application is as varied as traditional video is, and I think we would just need to embrace it and work with it in terms of the methodologies that we are developing.
Okay, a couple of questions in chat, and Claire Mullen asks, she says she doesn't have any experience with VR and science marketing. Are there any live examples, or is this still under investigation for now? When's it going to be released on the world?
This particular project or other projects in that space? So there's already a lot going on. I'm involved with Alzheimer organization where we're already using an app to increase empathy and understanding of family members, what it's like to live with living with dementia. So there's already a whole lot of things that are out there. The challenge always is you need that investment to then develop an app and a fully functional prototype. This was a lab testing environment, which is of course quite different to the kind of consumer market. So that needs different investment in testing and development, but there's a lot happening already. Yeah.
And Shinoda asks, talks about the inclusion of people in videos and said that her experience has been that videos, although they might be technically competent, that don't have people in, aren't nearly as appealing as those that do have people in them.
Yeah, so it's a very different approach to storytelling. Having come from documentary filmmaking, this was really different. It took a lot of testing, probably about 10 different attempts filming one static image of the beach, because the height translates very different. What would be eye-to-eye kind of levels in traditional filmmaking looks like this chasm that you're going to fall into once you put a headset in. So playing around of what an acceptable height is for people and what acceptable experiences are is really important here. So different approach to storytelling. It works especially well if the action happens around the camera. We have worked with moving cameras. People can tend to get dizzy. So it just really depends who your audience is and what you are communicating in terms of what filmmaking techniques you can use. But we tend to say the action should be happening around the camera, and that's more engaging, but you really have to experiment with distances, because we filmed one scene at a bird feeder, which we thought would look beautiful in traditional video of just, kind of New Zealand parrots flying in and landing on the bird feeder and feeding, would look beautiful in traditional video. In 360, it looked like something from Alfred Hitchcock that was going to get you, it just translated into something totally different. So very different storytelling, but really exciting avenues for little investment.
Now, there are other questions as well, but we'll leave those to the discussion at the end. Sure. Thank you very much, Wiebke. There's a lot of interest in what you talked about. So let's turn to our second speaker, Daya Ratna Permatasari. And Daya Ratna is, I think, must be just about unique in Indonesia as being running her own consultancy business. And I would imagine now, I think 20 years it must be almost by now. Yes, by 20 years.
Since 2001.
2001. So Dia is going to, the title of her topic is Young Citizen Conferences, Tools for Developing Youth Science Culture. Dia.
Thank you, Ketos. Let me share my screen first. All right. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Stas, for welcoming me to speak at this very interesting event. Thank you very much that PCST let us the one that cannot fly to Rotterdam to talk here in PCST conference online. So I'd like to share our experience on organizing young citizen conferences, and we thought it's good for as tools for developing youth science culture. My name is Diah Ratna Permatasari. I'm from Dr. Rabbit Science Inc. Indonesia. So as we know that the exponential growth of new technologies like what Wiebke mentioned before, it's very amazing, and has generated some exciting possibilities. But however, there is also raised new ethical, social, and ecological issues. So we thought that if we have the open-mindedness of young scientists combined with their sense of social responsibility, it can yield important contributions to this dialogue. So let me introduce the Young Citizen Conferences history. Actually, it's not done by us at first, but that's MILSET International. MILSET International is a non-governmental, non-profit, and politically independent. Non-profit and non-politically politically independent international organization which aims at developing science culture among young people. And it was actually established in 1987 in Quebec, Canada, and they have regional branches: Africa, American Latin, Asia, Europe, North American, and Vostok. And Dr. Rabbit is under the MILSET Asia. They have also other events like Expo Science International or regional, like Expo Science Asia, Vostok, and all that. And also they have Journal of Science Engagement. So back to the young citizen conferences. They have some goals that create the space where youth can express their views on the topic, engage youth in discussion and debate concerning their future, and enable youth to discover their personal responsibilities, because they can talk about them, and encourage youth to express their concerns about the topic through participation in an open global discussion, and present the voice of youth through short video presentation, which will be posted on the MILSET website or other internet platforms. Normally, the conference are offline, in some area that normally in the Expo Science International or Expo Science Asia. They have three things in the methodology: the concerns, discussions, and action. What is concerns about is, so that's include the introduce participants to the issue, because they are very young, right? That's from 8 to 25 years old, I think. The ages is quite broad. And we asked thought-provoking questions about the topic and their recent related observations and their experience, and what changes have they noticed now, I mean, at a certain time, and then which changes are having the greatest impact on their society. What could be the social consequences of those changes in the near future? And we also provide, the organizer also provides short videos on the topic, or guest speakers can present various opinions. So the second is discussion. Discussion is in small groups. The participants discuss ideas. It's quite different with what we have in like the PCST conference, let's say. So they have the participants talk about it, but here the participants has no paper, but they see the let's say the video or the speakers, the expert speakers, and then they will talk about it, about the topic in small groups. Yeah. So from the themes, there will be some other topics under the theme. So the discussion also encouraged them to identify possible future benefits and risks for its concern. If we see at the action methodology, they explore and list possible actions from the discussions, and then they will think what should be done, who should be responsible, should take the responsibility, what can participants do, in their community and in the world, and then how should we behave in our everyday life. As teams prepare short presentations of their recommendations. So the result of this conference is, as teams, the participants prepare short presentations of their recommendations. So in a very short time, they can make their recommendations. So we propose the ASEAN Young Citizen Conferences. So this one is organized by Dr. Rabbit Science in Indonesia. So why ASEAN? Because we thought it's close to us in Indonesia, and the time difference is not so far. Like here, I can say that good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody here. But think that ASEAN is quite close. Because of the COVID-19, we run it virtually. It was since 2021. But because it's virtual, then we also can put it into the Mindset International website and all that. The participants were not limited to ASEAN countries only. So then like some participants from Mexico, from Algeria, from Iran, and all that. So that's quite many of participants. Around almost 200, 194 at the first time, 2021, that joined this conference.
Okay, Daya, I'm going to ask you to wrap up in another sentence now, please. We'd like to move to questions.
Thank you. And then the ideas, yes. Okay, these are the two teams in the two conference that we did, the 2021 and 2022. As you see, the speakers are experts. Like here at the keynote speakers, we have the Indonesian Academy of Science president, and also ADB vice president. And also at the plenary session, we have some speakers like Dr. Jennifer Metcalf as well, other speakers. And we have this many countries.
I think we might let, I mean, you've presented a really interesting talk here and lots of wonderful possibilities, but we might let the audience ask some questions now, and we can return to this later.
All right. Okay, no problem. Yes.
Okay, thank you. But I was going to ask, how old are the participants in these events? What sort of age group you're looking to?
This is the age group. We invited 13 to 18 years old participants.
Okay, so they're sort of older teenagers, is eventually.
Older teenagers, yes.
Yeah. And what sort of topics have caused the most interest? What are the topics that they bring up?
So different themes in every year, so they have different themes like we have. Like in 2021's themes is actually inventing a new world. So we have some like in environment and energy and all that. So that's why we have so many speakers here. Let's say the plenary session, we have 9 speakers talk about from the science to the environment and all that, the space as well. So yeah, the teenagers like to talk about that. Many of them like the space topics, yeah, like the environment as well. So and
so Ragil Dien has a question here, and he says, how do you ensure that the speakers that you choose can speak at an appropriate level for the audience in child-friendly language, especially about the science? So how do you go about choosing your speakers?
All right. Most of the speakers here actually have engaged with the students, yeah, the young students. Like here, Professor Alfonso, he make the such interesting invention like the hologram professor. Okay. So that's interesting, and that's why we invited. Like other speakers, they have also some engagement with the students, so they can speak in their level of language.
Okay, now there are other questions about this. So the audience is obviously interested, Dia, but we'll have to return to them when we go into the discussion towards the end. So thank you very much indeed. It sounds like a really interesting initiatives that you've got going there. And I did want to hear a bit more about, is it Milset, the organisation that's responsible for it? Still, we can return to that later. So our third speaker today is Bonnie Determan, and Bonnie is from the Museum for Naturkunde in Berlin, and her topic is Lessons Learned from a Science Variety Show. So Bonnie, the floor is yours.
So hello everyone. For the beginning of my presentation, I want you to imagine yourself being in the biggest natural history museum in Germany that has 30 million objects in the collections. And you see a big stage in front of you where a scientist, the collection manager, and a taxidermist from the museum meet an artistic ensemble consisting an opera singer, a hula hoop artist, a clown, and an orchestra. And this is what it can look like. Together, those people talk about hidden museum stories and bizarre facts about various objects from the collection. And when you're there, you learn something new about biology that you might didn't know before. And in the next moment, you hear a song that is called Strange Museum, and then you are impressed by artistic performances. So it is a pleasure to welcome you to the show and to my presentation, When Art and Science Share the Stage in a Museum, Lessons Learned from a Science Variety Show. My name is Bonnie Determan, and I'm a program manager in the exhibition department in the Natural History Museum in Berlin, Germany. And today I want to tell you more about our art and science project, Glitzern und Denken, which can be literally translated to glittering and thinking. And the goals of our science variety show were to contribute to a new way of communicating scientific topics through a creative dialogue between artists and scientists who jointly develop and perform shows on the museum's themes. And it was also our goal to reach new target groups for science communication by addressing the audience emotionally. And our project ran for 3 years in the Natural History Museum in Berlin. And in total, we had 319 participants on site, around 1,000 digital viewers for the live streams, and more than 18,000 views of the recordings so far. And here you can see pictures of the 10 events we hosted in the museum. One was a test event, and then we had 3 shows with 3 dates each, and all of them were free of charge. And due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the events were shifted from in-person to digital and eventually hybrid events, but we also just couldn't have limited audiences due to the restrictions. And the different shows dealt with different topics of the museum, such as mollusks, insects, or species extinction. And the structure of the show, as well as the stage design, as you might see, are quite similar to have a recognition value, but they were always adapted to the specific theme of the evening. And the impact of performance like this depends on various elements. We evaluated the events, all of the events, with different quantitative and qualitative surveys, and the suggestions from the results have been incorporated into the further development of all our shows. And one of the most important learnings is that the interaction between the artists and the scientists on stage and the roles they hold are crucial for the success of the event. After the show, the scientists were perceived more approachable and communicative than before the show, which is great. And the artists are seen as the real link to the audience. But compared to the artists, the scientists sometimes seemed a bit reserved. So that means the scientist's own communication skills leave an impression on the audience, but so does the interaction with the artist and the framing by the presenters on stage. Just to give you a quick example, the artists played on the stereotype of the nerdy scientist, and unfortunately that reinforced the stereotype with our audience rather than breaking it down as it was actually intended. So you should always consider how active the scientists are on stage and what impression of them is conveyed by the artist. It is also essential to find the right balance between the program elements to create a holistic event. This means that there should not be too long scientific lectures, but there should be enough time to talk about scientific facts without oversimplifying the content. And it's important to diversify the program with different perspectives from various people to have different musical styles and performances. So to create an unexpected connection of topics and disciplines, and this mixture appeals different senses and therefore makes the topics easier to access them, and it's easier to open the mind because you don't have to focus all the time, but you still get entertained with stories that have a scientific content. And when we started the project, we assumed that we had two main target groups: people who are interested in science but not in art, and vice versa, people who are more likely to be interested in art but not in science. And the assumption that there is a big difference has not been confirmed in our evaluation. We mostly reached people who were interested both in art and science, and most of them had a quite high level of formal education. And also, we couldn't find any difference between our on-site and digital audience, so they were quite similar. It therefore makes sense to define target groups more precisely before starting projects, just to choose the right marketing channels and to also select artists according to the chosen target group, because they bring their fans into the museum or into your institution. So even if at first glance, it is not self-evident that art and science come together and are compatible, the combination of them, the combination of art and science, was quite a fitting one for both the artists and scientists on stage, as they told us, and for the audience as well. But there are a few things that you should keep in mind if you wish to conduct similar projects like this. But this kind of event is an example of how a science variety show can enable a new way of communicating about science. So if you are curious by now and want to know more about the project, you can just scan the shown QR code and check out our YouTube playlist, where you can watch our show recordings in English and in German if you're capable of speaking German. And in the end, I just want to thank our partners and the people involved in this project, which are the staff at the Museum für Naturkunde Berlin, the artists of the Ensemble Salonfähig, the evaluators of the Wissenschaft im Dialog, and our sponsor, to the Lotte Stiftung Berlin. So thanks for them, and thanks for you for listening.
Oh, Bonnie, the pictures you showed look fantastic, wonderful visual appeal. So I look forward to having a look at some of these shows. So we are open to questions if anyone in the audience has got questions. But I was going to ask you about the artists somehow humanizing the scientists. Is that what you said? So what did the scientists contribute on their own behalf? What did they do to the people from a artistic side of things?
Yeah, it was the idea to show that scientists are like normal people, that you can communicate with them, and they told they met in the collection and showed all of the things that were lying there and told all the stories, and then together they developed, okay, what are the things that we want to tell in a show? And the scientists sometimes said, this is quite necessary for our scientific research, and the artist sometimes said, that might be right, but it isn't the interesting story we should tell. So it always was like a balancing between those two groups.
But there's a question here from Matthew Coslet, and that is, how do you make an event like this appeal to people with low science capital or people with less engagement in science? Because I presume that is your target audience, isn't it, to boost the science awareness of audiences. So what do you use as a way of getting them in? Well,
first of all, it was the events took place in the gallery hall. So it was in the museum. We had the stage there for 2 weeks. So all the people were crossing by when visiting the museum just saw that. Okay. And I think we just had one artistic ensemble we worked with. It might be an idea to work with different artists because they are with the opera and that is quite high culture. Yeah. But there are also different ways to do that. But still, I think it's a project mostly for people who might be interested in arts and don't come to the Natural Museum for History. So that was basically the idea. It's not the perfect format for reaching out to everyone.
So Ilse says that in Austria they have shows, science combined with humour comedy shows, and they've been very successful there. But another question is from Carla, and Carla asks, how do you manage to recruit your scientists? Where do you find them? Are they keen to be involved? And what sort of performance do they have to give?
Well, in our museum, science communication is quite a big deal, so it's not that difficult to find people who are willing to be involved. It's more a problem that they all have that busy schedule and don't really have the time, because you have to rehearse and do all the content in before, and then you have the shows, which is like enormous amount of time that you just have to be there. And of course, there are some people who said, I can talk to the artists and I can give them a talk about the things I'm working, but I don't want to go on stage. But that's okay as well, because not everyone wants to be on stage. Yeah, but there are people that you know that are willing to do that. And we have, like, in our museum, 400 people working there in total, and mostly half of this is scientific people. So there's a highly chance that you find someone who is willing to do that.
Oh yes, there are some great character actors among scientists around the place. Bonnie, there are more questions, but we'll return to them towards the end of the session. Thank you very much. It looks a great show. So let's turn now to Rita Ceccarelli. Rita is from CNR in Italy, and her office is in Milan, but she works in a beautiful part of, or she lives in a beautiful part of Italy, about 2 hours away by train from door to door. And her topic is a vision on communication, creating common grounds among disciplines, arts and society in scientific research. So, Rita.
So thanks a lot. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, as Dia was saying earlier to all the audience. And thanks for welcoming us. We are a group of scholars and practitioners from the realms of science communication, social studies of science, education, and the arts. The names we are listed here, but we are a subgroup of a bigger group, including also soil experts, environmental engineers, anthropologists, and philosophers. So I'm highlighting this part because the core concept of our contribution here is pivoting on communication, conceived as a way to sustain and build research, and especially transdisciplinary research. So understand why I mentioned all these disciplines working together. We work in this project you see on the right, the Bridges project, whose focus is on the case study of soil health, and is aiming at experimenting a transdisciplinary approach to knowledge production. But let's take a step back. Why do we need, or why do we say it's important to build a transdisciplinary way of knowledge production? You have here a full screen image of a reason. This is a picture of desertification of drought. And this is so-called socio-ecological problem in the realm of soil. Of course, climate change is another example. These problems are all inherently complex, where, as the name says, the social and scientific dimension are not distinguishable. They are intertwined. They incorporate values, interests, and visions. They position on the border among different disciplinary understandings, and they're controversial since they incorporate values, and they are urgent and with high stakes. So it's really difficult to address them. And some of you probably have recognized the features of the post-normal science, which was proposed some decades ago, and which actually is a major source of inspiration of our approach. And another pillar of our approach is this quote, we can say at the top. So the idea of assuming the responsibility intended as the reconnect to our ability to respond to the challenges that are facing us. So what can be the vision of communication in such an approach? Of course, in this case, the complicated or simple, as depicted here, or super complicated interaction between two distinguishable in some way realms of science and society cannot work anymore. So our vision is that of an extended community of knowledge producers, because one of the building blocks, I can say, of transdisciplinarity is the rethinking of knowledge towards including all the knowledge producers, regardless of their belonging to the academia or their ability to produce codified knowledge like the one we read in textbooks. So if you start research for dismantling or better change your posture toward disciplinary sources of knowledge, then you have to change your vision of the relations between science and society. So a new understanding of science communication in this case means having communicators on the same floor of all the other actors. So not only engaging in producing understandable knowledge towards the public and whatever, but all engaged in producing relevant knowledge, learning from shared experience, and supporting the circulation of knowledge to all the actors, be they internal or external to the project. So this is the main thing that we learned from our experience, that somehow all activities borrowed methods from communication, because they were engaged in building dialogues and tying together differences, which is actually, if you think that, like the etymology of communication, building common grounds, as the PCST conference has highlighted as an overarching theme. So here is an example of our approach. We found that the arts were particularly suitable to provide opportunities for experimenting transdisciplinary research, because the aesthetic approach to soil research was always context-bound, deeply context-bound, open to different levels of experience, from the practical to the social communicative to the symbolic level as well. So in this sense, it was art research and practice stood both as methods to know the world outside, while at the same time allowing to follow a transformative interior path, which we found was really necessary in this kind of process, a personal change of paradigm. These were experiences of digging the soil, observing what was over and below the soil, and then manipulating and exhibiting the outcomes in an artistic way. Here you have painting with soil, both indoors and outdoors, so two different experiences, but with real soil from our home. Actually, this came from our gardens and we prepared it together. Other moments, training young and staff researchers to mainly raise awareness about the features of research, practice, and visions altogether. And of course, for having transdisciplinarity to be real, you also need hard science. In this case, we conceived as a participatory science. It was an experiment of citizen science, making use of these so-called litter bags, which were buried in the ground, left there for 40 days, and then extracted and analyzed in order to understand the status of the health of the soils. And you can see here pictures from collective boring the litter bags. And before that, there was a meeting where all the actors together, young researchers, senior researchers, and citizens association citizens produced together the research instruments. These litter bags were sewed by the people. Here you have our artist, Rafaela Spagna, showing the field notebook, what we call the field notebook, they handmade actually, which contained proposals to observe and reflect on the experience while the experiment was ongoing during the 40 days, and to note down their observation, reflection, and sketches. So they were really guided to move on different levels, scientific and personal transformation level. This was allowed particularly by the arts approach. A note on the many, of course, as in all our other projects, we produced a lot of digital instruments. And the idea here, we stick to the idea of not producing them as a way to obtain visibility, to promote the project, but really also these instruments were put at the service of knowledge building and knowledge sharing. So this is just one and often they were co-built, and they provided grounds again to fine-tune and to refine the visions. So these were really instruments of research in our case. And finally, a note on the outcomes, because if the whole vision of research changes, then the outcomes must also change. So this is a draft of an outcome we are preparing alongside papers and participation to conferences like this. It's a sort of cahier d'artiste, which will show the collection of hybrid materials produced along the project. Finally, of course, we are enthusiastic of our experience because it allowed really to overcome many perceived limitations of the traditional way of doing science, of doing research. But we would like to share and also to discuss with the audience, if somebody, especially if somebody has experienced a similar research paths, what we identified as pitfalls. So the paradigm change, which is so important, is also a lot of effort and time consuming, and appears to be grounded often on personal biographies. So people who already experienced diverse approaches to knowledge production from diverse disciplines. It's always necessary to engage with the expectation of the people. So it needs time and effort again also to rediscuss, for example, the citizens, or also the same communicators in the group, stick to received vision of science and of science communication, which we really had to rediscuss before starting to work. So this is tiring. There is also a fatigue from the application of a dialogic approach to everything. And finally, also, we have to acknowledge a frustration in some cases from embracing complexity, so renouncing to reductionism. Sometimes, as I was saying, is frustrating because it doesn't lead to effective results in short terms. So it is necessary to face complex problems, but you have to take it into account that it will frustrate some of the participants not to reach to a conclusion, to a clear conclusion quickly. So please, if you want to write to this mail, so write in the chat or discuss now. We are really ready to discuss these points. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rita. That sounds really interesting. So we're open for questions. If anyone would like to ask questions, please chime in. I accept the fact that some people would become frustrated by this, because if you're working across disciplines or across institutions, the explanations must be quite significant, and the different systemic approaches that people take must also be quite different, and that means that everything is slowed down. Do you find the advantages that you get from it, is that worth the effort that you have to put into making things work?
That's a good point. Well, the effort is big, and this was the reason also because the project didn't have it was really focused on the process. Because of this, we also experimented the process instead of focusing on results. Our target is to establish participatory indicators of soil health, so not to make measures, for example. Yeah, I would answer that yes, it's worth doing that because of the introductory part of my talk. So it's necessary to do it. So you have somehow to start to experiment a path and then to fine tune it. So this is the idea of our approach. But yes, you have to take it into account the pitfalls as well as we're heading towards a new way of doing research, but the process is difficult.
Okay, well, look, let's leave further questions until we come up for discussion time, which will come up to after our final speaker today. So thanks very much, Rita. That's a really interesting process you've outlined there, and I'm sure people will want to quiz you deeply, and you did have some specific questions that you did want answered. So let us turn to Kinkidi Dasgupta Misra. Kinkidi is from Vigyan Prasar in India, and she's talking about, her topic is portal bridging gaps in science communication and connecting researchers, scientists, and policymakers. So Kinkini, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Toss. Very good morning to you all. A good afternoon here in India. Respected Professor Toss and all other co-panelists who presented here today. Today I'm going to talk about how web portal be an innovative means of science engagement. And I'm working as a senior scientist with Vigyan Prasad. Vigyan Prasad is a Hindi word which has emerged from Sanskrit, meaning science, communication, popularization, and widespread dissemination. And we are a national level organization working under the Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India. In the last few years in India, the number of public engagement initiatives by the government, researchers and their institution and independent sectors have risen up significantly in the country. And these efforts, however, need to be integrated such that they remain individually unique, but collectively impactful to make the whole of public engagement with science greater than the sum of its parts. So why promote public engagement with science? The rift between the opinions of the scientists and the public has been there. It's persisted over decades. Whether it is genetically modified crops, or is it safe to eat, or if climate change is due to human activity. Even the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that exactly how filling up this rift is critical for a rational and evidence-based decision-making by public on one hand, and of science to be responsive to local and global challenges on the other. So most of the respondents observed that while the public in India is interested in science, their understanding of it is low, primarily due to lack of access to scientific information. So with that background, Vigyan Prasad has initiated an ISTI portal, which is India Science, Technology and Innovation Portal, which is a de novo digital communication platform, first of its kind, where we are trying to really engage not only the communities from the society with the researchers, scientific communities, professionals, industries, and all other who are in the S&T, science and technology ecosystem. This is my flow of presentation. I'm just skipping this. So just to give you a background, that this ISTI portal in short, which is India Science, Technology, Innovation Portal, it has been initiated for last more than 4 years now. It has been envisaged by government as a centralized repository system for all funded scientific research, including funding agencies, projects, the research that are going on, the current research projects, their details, what are their project outcomes, and what is their scholarships they are being provided, which are being funded by both by government and non-government. So basically, this portal is aggregating all the information that is being generated within the STI ecosystem in the government. And it is also, the purpose is to minimize the duplication of efforts that need for data curation, crowdsourcing of ideas from the stakeholders. That is one engagement this ISTI is providing, which is giving a new dimension of public engagement. And when I say public engagement, I mean the diverse audience group, not only the public or the general people, but also the other targeted user groups. This is an ISTI portal, which has more than 20,000 live current research. And we give the information and then we direct them to their respective websites. Suppose it is a project of a university or any academic institutions or any in the private sector supported projects. So we collect that, we give them the information. The entire research and technology is divided into 16 subject domain areas. Technology is around more than 10,000 technologies, which gives us also the information about technology readiness level. STI organizations, funding opportunities, program and schemes offered mostly by the scientific ministries, departments, and other line ministries. The public engagement of science, that with the objective that it is increasingly being recognized by governments, industry, academia, and the general public as a critical instrument to bring openness and transparency in decision making. around science and technology, increasing the representatives to help address the issues. So with that in mind, the ISTI portal provides the data generated, caters to the wide range from students to policymakers. We capture all the current research and development that is going on in the public domain. These are all the published literature. Currently, it holds 1 lakh of unique records. Visitorship, if you see, it is around 2 million annual visitors, where 80% of the audience is in the captive age group of 18 to 35 years. So it is the youth who is coming to the portal, and 10% is the returning visitors, who are the future custodians of Indian science, technology, and innovation ecosystem. This is the diverse audience group. When we started working on this project, we realized that who is responsible for taking science to the public? Is it the science communicators or a few science journalists? It is the research or the researchers who generate scientific knowledge, or the public funded institution that host or fund research, or other players like media, policymakers, NGOs, equal stakeholders. Who are that? So we thought that if we really need to communicate science, engage science, and bring the public science engagement, we need to cater to this diverse user groups and target audiences. And if you see in India, the public communication of science has largely been the domain of government science agencies and the scientific community, and there are a handful of science communicators, science extension workers, and journalists. So this is how we cater to different group, the students and scientific communities. We provide information. This portal is an information portal on ongoing and completed research, access to information on funding, collaborative opportunities, enticing students to science, policymakers, basically management and governance issue, reducing duplicity. I just would like to cite one example, that suppose a Department of Biotechnology is funding a project which is being not approved, or it has its funding within a period of next 3 years. The same proposal is being submitted to Department of Science and Technology with a little bit of tweaking in the proposal and taking another component for funding. So to reduce duplicity of this funding and efficiency in research funding, this portal is being addressed and being seen and taken by the policymakers to help them, to make them an informed decision making. Similarly, industries, we have done a lot of academia industry partnerships. We are providing a lot of information, and we supply regular information on new technologies, both ways, from the industry to the academics and from the academics to the industries. And there are other users, which are students, engineering students, general public, startup entrepreneurs, and women is another community, if you say, and another audience who are coming regularly, where we are addressing their issues of increasing the participation of women in STEM. These are the features on the portal.
Kinkini, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you there. We did want to have some time for questions towards the end, but one of the issues that I think occurs in many countries is scientists don't have any incentives to communicate. Do you find this is the case in India? Do you find scientists naturally want to communicate? Is it expected of them as part of their job?
Sir, I'll tell you, it's true that researchers and scientists do not find much incentive to communicate, to talk about their research that is going on in the lab. But Government of India has started a program where they have made it an mandatory kind of a thing for every researcher to publish, to write their research work in popular science, and which are being awarded actually during the National Science Day. And our organization is providing, we are doing sensitization workshops and awareness workshops to cater to train them and create the awareness how these researchers should write popular science articles about their research that is going on. So that initiative has been taken up by government.
Okay, and how are the scientists responding to that?
Yeah, so it is mainly, if you see, again, the young researchers, young scientists, they are very forthcoming. They are very enthusiastic to talk about their science. There is little resistance among the senior scientists, but even that cross-bridge organizational collaboration is going on. to break that ice, that
Okay,
barrier.
now, yeah, I think it's a continuing problem. Now, Nurulani has asked a question in chat. It's quite a detailed question, but he wanted to know, do, for instance, universities have to submit the results of their research, or what's your method of gathering up all the information that goes into the portal? How do you capture all the research?
Yes. So there is what we are doing is that we write to the departments, the ministries, their information managers. They provide us the basic information. That is one. The information that is already available, published in their public domain. That is number two. These are the two ways. Third, the one which is in pipeline is we're trying to have their databases, kind of developing an ontology so that we can take that database, nice. And there is an interoperability of the data accesses, but that is in progress. So right now it is through a Google form that we have created, and the backend, the data is getting, so it's a knowledge management portal system that we have done at the backend, through which the content is getting supplied by the donor ministries and funding agencies.
All right. Thank you very much, Kinkini. It's been really interesting hearing how India is tackling this immense challenge, and particularly immense given the size of the population and the number of scientists and technologists that work in India. But I did want to, I said at the end that we'd have some time, and we've got about 8 or 10 minutes for questions to any of the speakers tonight. And one of the themes which has come out of tonight, there's a broad theme of communication, but there's also a theme of communicating to difficult audiences, I think, and a theme of using the arts as a way of, as a vehicle for getting to people. Policymakers, I think, are notoriously difficult to reach in some ways, and there's a growing realization that we need to use novel methods. So I'd invite any of the speakers to talk about the idea of using novel methods and which ones have they found most effective in reaching non-specialist audiences in terms of science communication. How do they go about reaching these non-specialist audiences? So would any of our speakers like to respond to that?
I can start.
Yeah, please, Bonnie.
Well, first of all, the artists we work with are not specifically interested in science, and that developed over the time. And I think when you give scientists the space to talk about the things they're interested in, this also brings curiosity to others. So, well, we have a big theme of nature. So there's always interesting facts. You just need to find a way to spread the word about that. And I think artists can be a way to find new ways of communicating about it.
Yes, I wondered whether, Wiebke, you might like to buy into this argument as well, because you're certainly stretching right outside a traditional policy-oriented audience for scientists.
Yeah, and I actually think that is where marketing comes in as a really powerful tool for science communication. If you talk about non-traditional approaches, it's the kind of discipline that uses social science and social psychology to reach these non-expert audiences based on people's needs, barriers and benefits, like barriers to communication, science communication, benefits, how do we communicate values. So I have found a lot of tools that are incredibly helpful. And for me, the art is, is the visual art of whatever communication it is. Words can be art, film can be art, soundscape can be art. So for me, that is then the medium of communication. But for me, it's that kind of rigorous marketing tools merging that with science that I've found incredibly appealing over time. Yeah.
There was a bit of a debate about 10 years ago, and that was, is science communication a discipline? And there was some discussion about this, and in the end it was decided that, I think, or many commentators felt that science communication was the ultimate cross-disciplinary arena because it draws on expertise from so many different disciplines, from economics to sociology to the natural sciences and the rest of it. Rita, you talked about this importance of reaching common ground. What have you found as the most successful way of stretching outside the natural sciences and involving other people in the debates and discussions you want to have?
So thanks for your question. We had, I think, two moments that were particularly successful. One was also was thinking about this while as an answer for the previous question, the citizen science approach, and bound with the that field notebook that I was showing. So people were engaged in doing something and also taking care of something they could really had the control over. I mean, they had to dig this litter bag, control it, then update via the app the data that they could observe, and also write down with this guidance of artistic practices. So I think this was when it worked, because it didn't reach great numbers, because of course every time you do everything that is transformative, you cannot work on huge numbers, but really it worked very well. On the other side, I think again, these experiences of digging that we had, this was among researchers, so not with what we call the public, but researchers from many different disciplines, from SSH to natural sciences and the arts. And so spending the traditional way of observing. So why am I doing this and where am I getting? So they were asked to suspend this and just observe, which is what is in common among artists and observe with the senses among artists and scientists. I think this was particularly successful in our group.
So Daya, I wanted to reach out to you. Did you have people or the youth that you engaged in your citizen youth conferences? Did many of those come from a sort of social sciences or an artistic background, or were they all keen young people fascinated by the science? So what sort of people did you attract to those youth conferences of yours?
Okay, thank you very much, Tos. Yeah, mostly they're students from any, well, there is no such special background. That's just the students. So I think it's not really they may like the science. Maybe some of them, yes. Some of them is have motivation on that science, but not all, because sometimes they just like to, okay, we just can engage join this program because it's free, it's for free, so we didn't take some fee from that. So there are a lot of them that actually they just know about the topics, but they can still discuss about that topic after they learn from the experts. That's our experience.
Yes, and Kinkini, I wanted to bring you into this because we've heard from a European perspective today that they're strongly interested in transdisciplinary work, a transdisciplinary approach to getting discussion going on scientific natural science topics. I mean, India is a country of actors and drama and colour. Do you find, is this something that enters into the consideration for Vigyan Prasar and your operations?
Yeah. See, I just would like to say, when we communicate to the non-scientist audiences, the general people, I would like to say India has just completed 75 years of its independence. So we did
sure.
a year-long program across the country, and especially in the remote areas. So we have a huge tribal population, which are
Sure.
being spread over many states. So what we have found, sir, we have used the popular method, that is the folk theater, folk music and dance. That is one. The script was designed and developed by us on the theme, which actually what we've realized is the content needs to be contextualized. It cannot be one type of program, no size fits all. So what we have did is when we talk to the tribal women group, they are saying that we have a strong, our own indigenous knowledge system. So they are not ready to take up any modern S&T, cannot be, just imposed on them. So what they are saying is that please try to understand our knowledge system, bring out the system, find out the gap areas, the systemic gap, and fill those gaps with your S&T, science and technology knowledge. So this is a very, and so then what we have approached, we have told the policymakers, the funding agencies, is that you need to revisit your program design, because it has to be bottom-up approach. It cannot be only top-down. So it has to be a blend of bottom and top-down. That is how our experience goes with the remote people group. We have used community radio, sir. That is working quite successful. There are a lot of community radio stations which are owned, operated by the local people. So that is another. And we are using, the government is using under the National Mission of Digital India, they're using ICT as a tool, which is a kind of a tool and an enabling, communication technology medium for communicating the scientific development. The issues with India is more of, sensitizing, having the scientific understanding, removing their superstitions and the misbeliefs. They're still predominant in the rural areas. They would like to take the modern science, the development, especially in COVID-19, which we have seen this portal really catered to the needs of all these communities, not only the rural, even the urban people. So there we are saying the needs are different. The approach has to be different. It has to be a multi-sectoral, the framework has to be quite multilingual. Vigyan Prasad provides science content in 15 Indian languages. So for every region,
I think that's the lesson really that's come out of today's session. The fact that multidisciplinary, cross-sectoral, and recognizing that ordinary people have, in fact, a local knowledge that they can apply to the sorts of problems our various countries and economies face. We have enough time, we have enough material, I think, to go on for another 2 or 3 hours, but unfortunately we have come to the end. So I would like to thank warmly our speakers today, Wiebke Finkler, Dinah Ratna-Permatasari, Bonnie Determan, Rita Ceccarelli, and Kinkini Dasgupta Misra. Thank you very much indeed. It's been a really interesting discussion, and I'll wish you good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.